Ars Goetia. In 1641, within the dim archives of a monastic library in northern Italy, a scholar cataloging forbidden manuscripts stumbled upon a leather-bound volume sealed with brittle wax and iron clasps. The book bore no title on its spine, only a faint sigil etched into the cover, a geometric seal unlike any known ecclesiastical symbol. When the clasps were forced open, the manuscript revealed intricate diagrams of circles, triangles, and cryptic seals arranged with unnerving precision. At the center of its pages lay a catalog of 72 names, each accompanied by elaborate sigils and detailed instructions. The document was identified as a fragment of a much older work known as Ars Goetia, the first section of the infamous Lesser Key of Solomon. According to records recovered from the monastery's restricted index, the manuscript had been confiscated by church authorities and sealed away under strict prohibition. It was never meant to be read again. The Ars Goetia is believed to have originated in the 17th century, though its contents draw upon earlier medieval and Renaissance traditions of ceremonial magic. Written in a mixture of Latin, Hebrew, and archaic English, the text presents itself as a systematic guide to summoning and commanding 72 infernal entities, each described with meticulous detail. These entities, identified as kings, dukes, princes, and marquises of a shadowy hierarchy, were said to possess extraordinary abilities, revealing hidden knowledge, influencing minds, discovering lost treasures, and manipulating the forces of nature. Each spirit is accompanied by a unique sigil, a symbolic signature intended to bind and control the summoned entity within a protective circle. The manuscript's diagrams are executed with unsettling precision. Concentric circles, inscribed with sacred names and geometric ratios, are designed to contain forces beyond human comprehension. Instructions dictate the exact planetary hours, astrological alignments, and ritual instruments required for successful invocation. Scholars who have studied surviving copies noted the mathematical symmetry of the seals and the consistent recurrence of sacred numerology, suggesting a deliberate and systematic structure rather than superstition or folklore. Even skeptics have acknowledged the intellectual rigor embedded within the text, raising questions about its true purpose and origins. Historical records indicate that possession of the Ars Goetia was strictly forbidden by ecclesiastical authorities. During the height of the Inquisition, individuals suspected of owning or copying such manuscripts faced imprisonment, exile, or execution. Surviving references describe confiscations carried out in secrecy, with many copies destroyed or sealed within restricted archives. In several documented cases, inventories of forbidden texts listed the Ars Goetia under categories reserved for heretical or dangerous knowledge. Some monastic records mention that scribes tasked with reproducing portions of the manuscript were later reassigned or silenced, their work removed from official catalogs without explanation. In the centuries that followed, fragments of the text resurfaced in private collections, occult circles, and secret societies. Yet official acknowledgement remained scarce. Photographic reproductions of early manuscripts were reported missing from European archives, and requests for access to original copies were frequently denied. Scholars attempting to trace the manuscript's lineage encountered gaps in documentation, sealed collections, and unexplained disappearances. The pattern suggested not mere neglect, but deliberate suppression. If the Ars Goetia was nothing more than an elaborate work of superstition, its systematic censorship remains difficult to explain. The text presents itself not as mythology, but as a structured manual, one that implies a worldview in which knowledge, power, and authority could be invoked through ritual and symbol. Its enduring influence on Western occult traditions, secret societies, and esoteric philosophy underscores its historical significance. Yet its origins remain shrouded in ambiguity. Today, the manuscript survives in scattered fragments, preserved within restricted archives and private collections. Digital reproductions circulate cautiously, often accompanied by disclaimers and scholarly skepticism. Yet the sigils remain unchanged, the names unaltered, and the instructions intact, silent echoes of a tradition that refused to vanish. If the knowledge contained within the Ars Goetia was truly powerless, there would have been no reason to hide it, and if it was not, then the 72 names inscribed within its pages may represent more than symbols of superstition. They may be remnants of a system of knowledge once considered too dangerous to preserve in the light. Arbatel de Magia Veterum. In 1575, in the quiet Swiss city of Basel, a slender Latin manuscript emerged from the presses of an anonymous printer. Unlike other occult texts circulating in secrecy at the time, this volume bore no illustrations of demons, no blood-stained sigils, and no threats of infernal pacts. Its title, Arbatel de Magia Veterum, the Arbatel of the Magic of the Ancients, appeared almost scholarly, even philosophical. Yet, within months of its publication, the text began to circulate among alchemists, theologians, and scholars across Europe. Some praised it as a rare window into divine wisdom. Others warned that it contained teachings too dangerous for public dissemination. The identity of its author was never revealed. The reason for that silence has never been fully explained. The Arbatel differs sharply from the grimoires of demonic invocation that dominated Renaissance occult literature. Rather than summoning infernal spirits, the text outlines a system of celestial magic rooted in Hermetic philosophy and Christian mysticism. Written in precise Latin prose, it presents a series of aphorisms, 49 in total, each offering guidance on spiritual discipline, cosmic harmony, and the pursuit of divine knowledge. These aphorisms describe a universe governed by intelligences known as the Olympian spirits, 7 celestial beings associated with the classical planets: Aratron, Bethor, Phaleg, Och, Hagith, Ophiel, and Fool. According to the manuscript, these entities were not demons, but cosmic governors entrusted with maintaining order in the universe. Each spirit presided over a planetary sphere and wielded influence over earthly phenomena, from knowledge and fortune to war and wisdom. The text provided precise instructions for invoking these intelligences, including ritual prayers, planetary correspondences, and astrological timing. Unlike the elaborate ceremonial magic of other grimoires, the Arbatel emphasized purity of intention and spiritual enlightenment, rather than coercion or domination. Its rituals required no sacrifices, only devotion, discipline, and alignment with celestial harmony. Scholars of Renaissance occultism have noted the text's remarkable intellectual restraint. The language is measured and philosophical, blending elements of Christian theology with ancient Hermetic traditions. References to divine providence and moral responsibility permeate its pages, suggesting that the work was intended not merely as a manual of magic, but as a guide to spiritual transformation. Yet, beneath its serene tone lies a deeper implication, that humanity once believed it could communicate with intelligences beyond the physical world, entities not of superstition, but of cosmic order. Despite its seemingly benign nature, the Arbatel attracted suspicion from religious authorities. In an era marked by theological conflict and fear of heresy, any text proposing direct communion with celestial beings risked condemnation. Records from ecclesiastical archives indicate that copies of the manuscript were quietly confiscated or restricted in certain regions. Some editions disappeared from circulation entirely, preserved only in private collections and esoteric libraries. By the early 17th century, references to the text had become scarce, as though it had slipped deliberately into obscurity. The anonymity of its author remains one of the manuscript's greatest enigmas. No printer's mark identifies its origin, and no historical figure has ever claimed responsibility for its composition. Some scholars speculate that the work emerged from a secretive Hermetic circle, while others suggest it was penned by a theologian seeking to reconcile mystical traditions with Christian doctrine. Whatever its origin, the deliberate absence of attribution ensured that the knowledge it contained could not be traced, censored, or easily condemned. Today, surviving copies of the Arbatel de Magia Veterum reside in rare book collections and academic archives, studied by historians of religion and occult philosophy. Its influence echoes through centuries of esoteric thought, shaping traditions that sought harmony between the spiritual and material worlds. Yet its message remains as enigmatic as its author, a quiet assertion that the universe is governed not by chaos, but by intelligences waiting to be understood. If the teachings of the Arbatel were merely philosophical speculation, history would have preserved them openly. Instead, they lingered in secrecy, guarded and seldom discussed. And if its celestial intelligences were ever believed to be real, then the silence surrounding its origin may not have been an act of caution, but one of protection. Liber Juratus Honorii. In 1346, amid the shadow of plague and religious upheaval sweeping across medieval Europe, a clandestine manuscript surfaced within the private archives of a Benedictine monastery in southern France. The parchment, bound in darkened vellum and sealed with an unfamiliar ecclesiastical insignia, bore the title Liber Juratus Honorii, the sworn Book of Honorius. According to a marginal note inscribed in faded ink, the manuscript had been copied under oath by a secret assembly of Magi who sought to preserve forbidden knowledge from the growing authority of the Church. The note concluded with a chilling declaration. The contents of the book were not to be revealed except under solemn vow, for they contain secrets capable of altering the divine order itself. The Liber Juratus Honorii is believed to have originated in the 13th century, attributed to the legendary Honorius of Thebes, a figure whose existence remains shrouded in ambiguity. Unlike the infernal grimoires of later centuries, this text presents itself as a sacred work of ceremonial magic, intended to invoke divine and angelic intelligences. Written in Latin, the manuscript outlines elaborate rituals designed to grant the practitioner visions of heaven, knowledge of cosmic mysteries, and the ability to command celestial forces. Its instructions are painstakingly precise, prescribing strict periods of fasting, purification, and prayer lasting weeks or even months before a single ritual could be attempted. At the heart of the manuscript lies a sequence of invocations known as the 7 sacred operations, each intended to reveal progressively deeper levels of divine knowledge. The rituals required the practitioner to construct consecrated circles inscribed with sacred names, geometric figures, and complex sigils derived from Hebrew and Greek traditions. These diagrams, executed with mathematical precision, were believed to create a protective boundary through which celestial beings could be summoned without peril. Scholars who have studied surviving copies have noted the manuscript's extraordinary level of intellectual sophistication, blending Christian theology with elements of Hermetic philosophy, Kabbalah, and medieval cosmology. What distinguished the Liber Juratus Honorii from other grimoires was its explicit claim that such knowledge had once been sanctioned by divine authority. The text asserts that its teachings were entrusted to a council of Magi under oath, sworn to preserve sacred wisdom, threatened by ecclesiastical suppression. It further alleges that church authorities, fearing the implications of direct communication with the divine, sought to eradicate the manuscript and silence those who possessed it. Whether these claims reflect historical reality or symbolic allegory remains uncertain, yet their presence underscores the manuscript's reputation as one of the most controversial works of medieval esotericism. Ecclesiastical records from the late Middle Ages reveal sporadic references to the confiscation of magical texts bearing the name of Honorius. Inquisition archives describe investigations into individuals accused of possessing forbidden manuscripts, promising visions of angels and access to divine knowledge. In several instances, such texts were seized and sealed within restricted collections, their contents deemed too dangerous for public circulation. By the 15th century, the Liber Juratus Honorii had largely vanished from official record, preserved only in scattered copies, hidden within private libraries and monastic vaults. Centuries later, fragments of the manuscript resurfaced in European archives, drawing the attention of historians and scholars of Renaissance magic. Surviving copies revealed a text of remarkable complexity and coherence, one that challenged conventional assumptions about medieval intellectual life. The rituals it described were neither chaotic nor superstitious, but methodically structured, suggesting a disciplined tradition of ceremonial practice rooted in theological inquiry. Such sophistication raised a troubling question. If the manuscript was merely a product of superstition, why was such effort invested in its suppression and preservation? Today, the Liber Juratus Honorii remains one of the most enigmatic grimoires of the medieval world. Original manuscripts are held in restricted collections, accessible only to select researchers, while references to its existence persist in scholarly footnotes and esoteric literature. Its origin remains uncertain, its author unidentified, and its influence obscured by centuries of silence. If the knowledge contained within the Liber Juratus Honorii was purely symbolic, Its disappearance from the historical record would be difficult to justify. Yet, if its rituals were once believed capable of granting direct communion with the divine, then the secrecy surrounding it may reflect more than superstition. It may represent an enduring fear of knowledge deemed too powerful to be revealed. The Black Pullet. In 1740, during the waning years of Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign, a young French officer reportedly became separated from his regiment while traversing the desolate expanse of the Egyptian desert. According to a narrative that would later surface in European occult circles, the officer, weakened by thirst and exhaustion, sought refuge within the ruins of an ancient temple hidden beneath drifting sands. There, he encountered a mysterious sage who offered him shelter and instruction. Over the course of several months, the sage revealed to him a series of esoteric teachings preserved in a manuscript known as La Poule Noire, the Black Pullet. When the officer returned to France, he carried with him a translation of this enigmatic text, a document that would soon captivate and disturb the intellectual elite of Europe. Published anonymously in the late 18th century, the Black Pullet distinguished itself from other grimoires through its unusual presentation. Rather than depicting infernal rituals or demonic conjurations, the manuscript presented itself as a compendium of talismanic magic, alchemical wisdom, and hermetic philosophy. Its pages were adorned with elaborate engravings of rings, amulets, and sigils, each rendered with mathematical precision and accompanied by detailed instructions for their creation. These talismans, according to the text, possessed extraordinary powers, the ability to command spirits, uncover hidden treasures, render the bearer invisible, and influence the will of others. The manuscript's engravings exhibit a striking uniformity and complexity, suggesting careful design rather than decorative flourish. Scholars who have examined surviving editions note the geometric symmetry of the talismans and their alignment with principles found in Renaissance Hermeticism and Kabbalistic symbolism. Each amulet is associated with specific planetary correspondences and astrological conditions, indicating that the text's author possessed a sophisticated understanding of esoteric traditions. Unlike many grimoires of its era, the Black Pullet avoids overt references to demonic invocation, instead presenting its rituals as a form of natural magic, an application of hidden laws governing the universe. Despite its ostensibly philosophical tone, the manuscript quickly attracted suspicion from religious and academic authorities. In several European states, the book was quietly prohibited or restricted, its circulation limited to private collections and clandestine societies. Records from 18th century bibliographic indexes reveal that editions of the Black Pullet were confiscated or removed from public libraries, categorized alongside other works deemed heretical or dangerous. The absence of a known author and the text's association with Egyptian mysticism further fueled speculation regarding its origins and authenticity. As the manuscript circulated through secret societies and occult fraternities, its reputation grew. Freemasonic lodges and esoteric circles reportedly studied its talismanic diagrams, regarding them as remnants of ancient hermetic wisdom preserved through centuries of secrecy. Yet official acknowledgement of the text remained scarce. Early editions vanished from institutional archives, and requests for access to original copies were often denied without explanation. The narrative of the French officer, whether historical or apocryphal, became inseparable from the manuscript itself, reinforcing the perception that the knowledge it contained had been deliberately concealed. Modern scholars remain divided over the authenticity of the Black Pullet. Some regard it as an elaborate literary fabrication, a romanticized invention born of Europe's fascination with Egyptian antiquity. Others argue that its symbolic language and technical precision reflect a deeper lineage rooted in Hermetic and alchemical traditions. Regardless of its true origin, the manuscript's enduring influence on Western occultism is undeniable, its talismanic imagery reproduced and studied across generations. Today, surviving copies of the Black Pullet reside in rare book collections and private archives, seldom displayed and rarely discussed in mainstream scholarship. Its engravings remain intact, their geometric forms unchanged by time, preserving a vision of power encoded in symbol and ritual. Whether these talismans were intended as metaphysical tools or symbolic representations of hidden knowledge remains uncertain. If the manuscript were merely a curiosity of 18th century imagination, its suppression would appear unnecessary. Yet the secrecy that has followed the Black Pullet for centuries suggests a lingering unease, a recognition that within its pages lies a system of knowledge once believed capable of reshaping destiny itself. And if such knowledge was ever taken seriously, then the silence surrounding its origins may not be accidental, but intentional. Grimorium Verum. In 1517, in the bustling port city of Venice, a manuscript surfaced under circumstances so obscure that its true origin remains uncertain to this day. Bound in darkened leather and written in a mixture of Latin and Italian, the text bore the ominous title Grimorium Verum, the true grimoire. According to a cryptic preface attributed to an elusive figure known as Alibek the Egyptian, the manuscript claimed to preserve ancient magical knowledge passed down through hidden lineages since antiquity. Within decades, the work began circulating quietly among occult practitioners and scholars across Europe, its reputation growing in secrecy as authorities sought to suppress its influence. Unlike many Renaissance grimoires that cloaked themselves in philosophical abstraction, the Grimorium Verum presented itself as a direct and practical manual of ceremonial magic. Its pages described intricate rituals designed to summon and command infernal entities, each accompanied by detailed instructions and meticulously drawn sigils. The text identified a hierarchy of spirits presided over by three supreme infernal princes, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Astaroth. Beneath them were numerous subordinate spirits, each believed to possess specific powers, ranging from revealing hidden knowledge and locating lost treasures to influencing human will and altering the course of events. The manuscript's instructions were strikingly precise. Practitioners were directed to craft ritual instruments from consecrated materials, engrave talismans with exact geometric proportions, and conduct invocations during specific planetary hours and astrological alignments. Circles of protection were to be inscribed with sacred names, while offerings and incantations were meticulously prescribed to ensure control over the summoned entities. Scholars who have examined surviving editions note the systematic structure of the rituals and the consistency of the symbolic language, suggesting a coherent tradition rather than mere superstition. Even critics acknowledged that the text's intellectual rigor reflected a sophisticated synthesis of medieval theology, Hermetic philosophy, and Kabbalistic symbolism. As its reputation spread, so too did efforts to suppress it. Ecclesiastical records from the 16th and 17th centuries reference confiscations of manuscripts associated with ceremonial magic, including works resembling the Grimorium Verum. During the height of the Inquisition, possession of such texts was considered evidence of heresy or diabolical practice. Inventories of prohibited books listed grimoires alongside other forbidden works, and numerous copies were reportedly seized and destroyed. In some instances, individuals accused of copying or distributing similar manuscripts were interrogated or forced to renounce their studies. Surviving references suggest that the Grimorium Verum was circulated in secrecy, preserved within private collections and clandestine societies to evade official condemnation. By the 18th century, the manuscript had largely vanished from public record, resurfacing only in fragmented editions and rare printings. Early bibliographers noted inconsistencies between surviving copies, raising questions about whether the original text had been altered or deliberately obscured. Requests for access to authentic manuscripts were frequently denied, and references to earlier editions disappeared from institutional catalogs. This pattern of disappearance, coupled with the manuscript's enduring notoriety, contributed to its reputation as one of the most dangerous and controversial grimoires in Western occult tradition. Despite its dark reputation, historians remain divided over the authenticity and antiquity of the Grimorium Verum. Some regard it as an elaborate fabrication of the Renaissance, crafted to exploit contemporary fascination with forbidden knowledge. Others argue that its complex symbolism and ritual structure reflect fragments of an older magical tradition, preserved through oral transmission and secret societies. Regardless of its origins, the text's influence is undeniable, shaping centuries of esoteric literature and inspiring both fascination and fear. Today, surviving copies of the Grimorium Verum reside in restricted archives, private libraries, and rare book collections, seldom exhibited and rarely discussed outside specialized scholarship. Photographic reproductions of early editions have reportedly vanished from institutional records, and access to original manuscripts remains tightly controlled. Its sigils, incantations, and instructions endure unchanged, silent relics of a tradition long consigned to secrecy. If the Grimorium Verum were nothing more than superstition, history would have preserved it openly. Yet the secrecy surrounding its transmission suggests a persistent unease, an acknowledgement that the knowledge it contains was once regarded not merely as myth, but as power. And if such power was ever believed to be real, then the question remains: was the true grimoire suppressed because it was false, or because it revealed truths humanity was never meant to command? Would you like me to continue with Part 6, the 6th and 7th Books of Moses? The 6th and 7th Books of Moses. In 1849, in a dimly lit print shop in Stuttgart, Germany, a curious manuscript emerged under circumstances that would soon attract both fascination and controversy. Bound in austere black leather and printed in Gothic script, the volume bore the title Die Sechste und Siebente Bücher Mose, the 6th and 7th Books of Moses. Presented as a continuation of the Pentateuch, the text claimed to reveal hidden chapters of sacred knowledge attributed to the biblical prophet Moses himself. Within months of its circulation, theologians, scholars, and ecclesiastical authorities denounced the work as heretical, while occult practitioners sought it with growing urgency. Its publication ignited debate across Europe, and its contents would ensure its place among the most forbidden grimoires of the modern era. The manuscript purported to unveil secrets concealed since antiquity: divine seals, mystical incantations, and symbolic diagrams believed to grant authority over spiritual forces. Written in a combination of German, Hebrew, and Latin, the text presented an elaborate system of ceremonial magic rooted in biblical tradition. Intricate engravings depicted talismanic seals known as the mystical tables of Moses, each accompanied by invocations invoking angelic hierarchies and divine names. Unlike infernal grimoires, the manuscript framed its teachings as sacred wisdom bestowed upon Moses during his encounters with the divine, suggesting that such knowledge had been intentionally withheld from canonical scripture. Scholars examining early editions noted the manuscript's remarkable synthesis of Kabbalistic symbolism, Christian mysticism, and Renaissance ceremonial magic. Its diagrams exhibit geometric precision and complex arrangements of Hebrew characters, reflecting an intellectual lineage grounded in esoteric theology. The seals were believed to command elemental forces, reveal hidden knowledge, and offer protection against malevolent entities. Whether regarded as spiritual allegory or ritual instruction, the text's systematic structure conveyed an impression of coherence and intentional design rather than superstition or folklore. Despite its theological framing, the manuscript quickly drew condemnation from religious authorities. Church officials denounced the work as apocryphal and deceptive, warning that its contents threatened to blur the boundary between sacred doctrine and forbidden practice. In several regions, possession of the text was discouraged or prohibited, and copies were removed from ecclesiastical libraries. The book's association with magical rites and divine invocation rendered it suspect in an era marked by religious orthodoxy and suspicion of esoteric traditions. Yet, attempts to suppress its circulation proved largely ineffective. By the late 19th century, the 6th and 7th Books of Moses had spread far beyond Europe, carried by immigrants to the Americas, and adopted within diverse spiritual communities. In the Caribbean, West Africa, and the United States, the text became intertwined with folk traditions and syncretic religious practices, where its mystical seals were revered as instruments of protection and empowerment. Its influence endured not only in occult circles, but also within cultural and religious movements that regarded the manuscript as a repository of sacred wisdom rather than heretical invention. As its popularity grew, so too did efforts to obscure its origins. Early manuscripts and printing plates vanished from archives, and conflicting editions appeared, each claiming authenticity. Scholars attempting to trace the manuscript's lineage encountered discrepancies in authorship, publication dates, and textual variations, suggesting deliberate alteration or concealment. Requests for access to original documents were often denied, and references to early printings disappeared from bibliographic records. This pattern of fragmentation and suppression contributed to the enduring mystery surrounding the text's provenance. Today, surviving copies of the 6th and 7th books of Moses are preserved within rare book collections and private libraries, studied by historians of religion and esoteric traditions. While theologians continue to dismiss the manuscript as apocryphal, its cultural impact remains undeniable, influencing spiritual practices across continents and generations. Its seals and incantations endure as symbols of a hidden tradition, one that straddles the boundary between faith, mysticism, and forbidden knowledge. If the manuscript were merely a pious fabrication, its persistent censorship would appear unnecessary. Yet the silence that surrounds its origins and the enduring reverence it commands suggest a deeper narrative, one in which sacred knowledge was not lost, but deliberately concealed. And if the teachings attributed to Moses were ever believed to hold genuine power, then the question remains, was this book forbidden because it was false, or because it revealed truths humanity was never meant to possess? Liber Razielis Archangeli. In 1471, within the fortified walls of a Florentine monastery, a manuscript of extraordinary origin was quietly presented to the court of Lorenzo de' Medici. Written in elegant Latin script upon parchment of remarkable preservation, the text bore the title Liber Razielis Archangeli, the Book of the Angel Raziel. According to the prologue, the manuscript was not composed by human hands, but delivered by the Archangel Raziel to Adam in the earliest days of creation. It claimed to contain the secrets of the cosmos, the movements of the heavens, and the hidden laws governing both the spiritual and material worlds. The Medici court, renowned for its patronage of scholars and philosophers, recognized its intellectual significance. Yet ecclesiastical authorities regarded the manuscript with suspicion, and within a generation, references to it faded into obscurity. The Liber Razielis Archangeli is believed to have originated in the 12th or 13th century as a Latin translation of earlier Hebrew mystical texts, collectively known as Sefer Raziel Hamalach. The manuscript presents itself as a compendium of celestial knowledge, integrating astrology, angelology, cosmology, and sacred geometry into a unified system of esoteric wisdom. Its pages are adorned with intricate diagrams depicting planetary spheres, zodiacal alignments, and geometric figures arranged with mathematical precision. Hebrew characters and divine names appear alongside Latin commentary, suggesting a deliberate synthesis of Jewish Kabbalistic traditions and Christian scholastic thought. According to the text, the Archangel Raziel served as the keeper of divine mysteries, entrusted with revealing sacred knowledge to humanity. The manuscript describes rituals intended to align the practitioner with celestial intelligences, emphasizing spiritual purification, prayer, and contemplation rather than coercion or domination. Each section correlates specific planetary hours, angelic hierarchies, and symbolic correspondences with precise astronomical calculations, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of medieval cosmology. Scholars who have examined surviving copies note the intellectual coherence of the work, recognizing its influence on Renaissance occult philosophy and the broader Hermetic revival. Despite its philosophical depth, the Liber Razielis Archangeli attracted suspicion from ecclesiastical authorities during an era of heightened theological scrutiny. Texts claiming direct access to divine or angelic knowledge were often regarded as potential threats to established doctrine. Records from ecclesiastical archives suggest that copies of the manuscript were restricted or quietly removed from monastic libraries, their circulation limited to private collections and scholarly circles. References to the text appear intermittently in Renaissance catalogs, yet complete editions remained rare, preserved within the guarded repositories of European courts and religious institutions. By the 16th century, the manuscript had become intertwined with the intellectual currents of the Renaissance, influencing scholars, alchemists, and astrologers seeking to reconcile ancient wisdom with emerging scientific inquiry. Figures associated with the Hermetic tradition regarded the Liber Razielis Archangeli as a bridge between divine revelation and natural philosophy. Yet its origin continued to provoke debate. Some theologians dismissed it as apocryphal, while others regarded it as a symbolic allegory rooted in mystical tradition. The absence of a definitive author and the manuscript's claim of celestial provenance only deepened its aura of mystery. Centuries later, surviving copies of the Liber Razielis Archangeli resurfaced in European archives, revealing a text of remarkable sophistication and enduring influence. Its diagrams and invocations bear striking resemblance to later works of ceremonial magic and angelic mysticism, suggesting that its teachings resonated across generations of esoteric scholarship. Yet access to original manuscripts remains limited, and references to early editions are fragmented, reinforcing the perception that its transmission was carefully controlled. Today, the Liber Razielis Archangeli is preserved within rare book collections and academic institutions, studied as both a historical artifact and a testament to the intellectual ambitions of medieval mysticism. Its pages continue to evoke a worldview in which the cosmos is governed by intelligences beyond human perception, accessible only through discipline, knowledge, and faith. Whether regarded as sacred revelation or symbolic philosophy, the manuscript stands as one of the most enigmatic grimoires ever recorded. If the Liber Razielis Archangeli were merely an allegorical work of medieval imagination, its restricted circulation would be difficult to justify. Yet the enduring secrecy surrounding its origins suggests a deeper unease, an acknowledgement that the knowledge it claims to preserve was once considered too profound or too dangerous for public understanding. And if the angel Raziel was believed to be the keeper of divine mysteries, then the silence surrounding this manuscript may not be a matter of skepticism, but of reverence. The Book of Oberon. In 1581, within the shadowed corridors of an Elizabethan estate in Warwickshire, a curious manuscript surfaced among the private papers of an obscure noble family. Bound in worn calfskin and secured with faded silk ties, the text bore no official title, only a sequence of ornate diagrams and cryptic invocations written in a mixture of Latin, English, and Hebrew. The manuscript would later be identified as the Book of Oberon, a grimoire attributed to the magical traditions of the Elizabethan court. According to archival annotations discovered centuries later, the manuscript had once circulated among scholars and courtly magicians during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, an era steeped in astrology, alchemy, and the pursuit of hidden knowledge. Yet its contents were deemed too dangerous for public dissemination, and the text vanished from official record. The Book of Oberon is believed to date from the late 16th century, a period marked by the flourishing of Renaissance magic in England. Unlike grimoires focused on infernal invocation, this manuscript centers on the conjuration of celestial and fairy intelligences, including the legendary King Oberon and Queen Mab. Written in a precise yet enigmatic script, the text outlines elaborate rituals designed to summon spirits of the air, communicate with angels, and obtain knowledge of hidden realms. Its pages are adorned with complex sigils, angelic alphabets, and geometric diagrams rendered with remarkable accuracy, suggesting a disciplined system of ceremonial practice rather than mere folklore. Scholars who have examined surviving fragments of the manuscript have noted its intellectual sophistication and its close association with the esoteric traditions of the Elizabethan era. The text incorporates elements of Christian mysticism, Hermetic philosophy, and Kabbalistic symbolism, reflecting the intellectual climate of a court fascinated by astrology and divine revelation. Historical parallels have been drawn between the Book of Oberon and the work of John Dee, the renowned mathematician and astrologer who served as advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Dee's experiments in angelic communication and his pursuit of celestial knowledge echo the themes found within the manuscript, suggesting that such texts were not merely speculative but part of a broader tradition of scholarly inquiry into the unseen. The manuscript's rituals prescribe precise astrological timings, sacred invocations, and ceremonial instruments intended to facilitate communication with supernatural intelligences. Protective circles inscribed with divine names form the foundation of these operations, emphasizing spiritual purity and discipline. Unlike grimoires associated with demonic conjuration, the Book of Oberon presents its teachings as a pathway to enlightenment and divine favor. Yet, its association with fairy kings and otherworldly beings rendered it suspect in an era of religious orthodoxy, where any claim of direct communication with spiritual entities risked condemnation. Records from Elizabethan and early Stuart England reveal a climate of suspicion toward magical practices. The Witchcraft Act of 1563 criminalized the invocation of spirits, and manuscripts associated with ceremonial magic were often confiscated or suppressed. Though no official decree names the Book of Oberon, bibliographic evidence suggests that similar texts circulated in secrecy, preserved within private collections, and concealed from ecclesiastical scrutiny. By the 17th century, references to the manuscript had faded, its existence preserved only in scattered fragments, and later rediscovered in archival collections centuries afterward. When fragments of the Book of Oberon resurfaced in the 20th century, within British archival repositories, scholars were struck by their coherence and historical significance. The manuscript revealed a sophisticated system of ritual practice rooted in the intellectual traditions of Renaissance England. Its diagrams and invocations bore striking resemblance to contemporary works of ceremonial magic, reinforcing the notion that Elizabethan scholars pursued knowledge at the intersection of science, theology, and mysticism. Yet access to the original manuscript remains restricted, and references to its provenance are fragmentary, contributing to its enduring mystique. Today, the Book of Oberon is regarded as one of the most enigmatic grimoires of the Elizabethan age. Preserved within rare book collections and studied by historians of esoteric traditions, it stands as a testament to an era when the boundaries between scholarship and sorcery were not yet clearly defined. Its sigils and invocations endure as relics of a forgotten intellectual pursuit, one that sought to bridge the human world with realms beyond perception. If the manuscript were merely a curiosity of Renaissance imagination, its disappearance from official records would seem unnecessary. Yet the secrecy that has surrounded the Book of Oberon for centuries suggests a deeper unease, a recognition that its teachings once promised access to forces beyond human understanding. And if the court of Elizabeth I truly entertained such knowledge, then the silence that followed may not reflect skepticism, but caution. Sefer Ha-Razim. In the early decades of the 4th century CE, within the intellectual heartlands of the Eastern Roman Empire, a mysterious Hebrew manuscript began circulating among select scholars and mystics. Known as Sefer Ha-Razim, the Book of Secrets, the text was said to contain knowledge transmitted by the angel Raziel to Noah after the flood, preserved through generations of sages and entrusted only to those deemed worthy. Unlike other mystical writings of its era, the manuscript did not merely speculate on divine mysteries. It presented itself as a structured system of celestial magic, revealing the hidden hierarchies of heaven and the rituals required to invoke them. For centuries, its existence was whispered among scholars, yet rarely acknowledged in official records. The Sefer Ha-Razim outlines a cosmology composed of 7 heavenly firmaments, each governed by angelic hosts entrusted with specific powers over the natural and spiritual worlds. Written in Hebrew and interwoven with invocations, incantations, and ritual instructions, the text provides a detailed map of celestial governance. Each firmament is associated with a distinct hierarchy of angels and cosmic functions, ranging from healing and protection to prophecy and control over natural forces. The manuscript prescribes precise rituals to access these powers, including the recitation of sacred names, the crafting of talismans, and the observance of specific planetary hours. Its systematic structure reflects an intellectual sophistication that distinguishes it from purely folkloric traditions. Scholars who have examined surviving fragments of the text note its synthesis of Jewish mysticism, Hellenistic astrology, and late antique magical traditions. The manuscript's ritual instructions exhibit parallels with Greco-Egyptian magical papyri, suggesting a cultural exchange between Jewish, Greek, and Egyptian intellectual communities during late antiquity. Unlike grimoires centered on demonic invocation, Sefer Ha-Razim presents its teachings as a form of celestial communion, emphasizing purity, discipline, and reverence for divine authority. Its practitioners were instructed to approach the rituals with humility and devotion, reinforcing the text's theological foundation and its alignment with sacred tradition. Despite its spiritual orientation, the manuscript's explicit instructions for invoking angelic beings rendered it controversial within Orthodox religious circles. Rabbinic authorities, wary of practices that blurred the boundary between divine worship and magical invocation, regarded such texts with caution, Over time, references to Sefer Ha-Razim diminished, and its circulation became increasingly restricted. The manuscript disappeared from mainstream scholarship, preserved only in fragments and obscure references within medieval mystical literature. Its absence from canonical religious texts contributed to its reputation as a forbidden work, accessible only to select initiates. Centuries later, fragments of Sefer Ha-Razim resurfaced in the Cairo Geniza, the vast repository of Jewish manuscripts preserved in the Ben Ezra synagogue of Fustat. Discovered in the late 19th century, these documents revealed portions of the long-lost text, confirming its antiquity and scholarly significance. The rediscovered fragments provided invaluable insight into the intellectual and spiritual traditions of late antiquity, demonstrating the coexistence of mystical theology and ritual practice within early Jewish culture. Yet, even with its rediscovery, access to complete manuscripts remained limited, and the text's transmission history continues to puzzle historians. Today, Sefer Ha-Razim is studied within academic institutions and rare manuscript collections, regarded as one of the most important works of ancient Jewish mysticism. Its structured cosmology and ritual instructions offer a rare glimpse into a worldview in which the heavens were perceived not as distant abstractions, but as accessible realms governed by intelligences responsive to sacred invocation. Whether interpreted as theological allegory or a practical ritual manual, the manuscript stands as a testament to humanity's enduring quest to understand and communicate with the unseen. If the Sefer Ha-Razim were merely a relic of mystical speculation, its disappearance from religious tradition would appear unremarkable. Yet the deliberate preservation and restricted circulation of its fragments suggest a deeper unease, a recognition that the knowledge it contained was once considered too powerful for general dissemination. And if its rituals were ever believed capable of invoking celestial forces, then the question remains: was the Book of Secrets hidden to protect humanity from illusion or to conceal truths that transcended ordinary understanding? The Sword of Moses. In the dim corridors of a European archive in the late 19th century, a Hebrew manuscript surfaced among a collection of forgotten mystical texts. Written in fading ink upon brittle parchment, the document bore a striking title: Harba de Moshe, the Sword of Moses. Unlike other grimoires of its era, this manuscript did not describe talismans, diagrams, or elaborate ceremonial instruments. Instead, it presented a formidable arsenal of sacred names, invocations, and incantations said to have been entrusted to Moses himself. According to its introduction, these divine words constituted a spiritual weapon, a sword capable of commanding angels, shaping natural forces, and unlocking hidden knowledge. Its rediscovery would ignite scholarly fascination and theological unease in equal measure. The Sword of Moses is believed to have originated in late antiquity, likely between the 4th and 6th centuries CE, within the intellectual milieu of Jewish mystical traditions in the Eastern Mediterranean. Written in Hebrew and Aramaic, the manuscript forms part of the broader corpus of Hekalat and Merkava literature, texts concerned with heavenly ascent, angelic hierarchies, and the mysteries of the divine throne. Unlike philosophical treatises, however, this work presents itself as a practical manual of sacred invocation, offering a series of ritual formulas intended to summon celestial forces and manifest divine authority. At the core of the manuscript lies an extensive catalog of angelic names arranged in hierarchical sequences. These names, inscribed with meticulous precision, were believed to function as conduits of divine power. The text prescribes specific incantations to achieve a range of extraordinary effects, healing the sick, controlling natural elements, revealing hidden truths, and warding off malevolent spirits. Unlike infernal grimoires, the rituals described in the Sword of Moses emphasize purity, prayer, and strict adherence to sacred law. Practitioners were instructed to observe periods of fasting, ritual cleansing, and spiritual preparation before attempting any invocation, reflecting a disciplined and reverent approach to mystical practice. Scholars who have studied surviving fragments of the manuscript note its remarkable coherence and linguistic complexity. The structure of the invocations reveals a sophisticated synthesis of biblical tradition, Hellenistic magical practices, and early Jewish mysticism. parallels with Greco-Egyptian magical papyri suggest a cultural exchange between Jewish and Mediterranean intellectual communities during late antiquity. Yet the manuscript's distinctly monotheistic framework sets it apart from other magical traditions, presenting its teachings as an extension of sacred revelation rather than a deviation from it. Despite its theological foundations, the explicit invocation of angelic powers rendered the manuscript controversial within Orthodox religious circles. Rabbinic authorities, wary of practices that blurred the boundary between reverence and manipulation of divine forces, regarded such texts with caution. Over time, references to the Sword of Moses diminished, and its circulation became increasingly restricted. The manuscript vanished from mainstream religious tradition, preserved only in fragments and obscure references within medieval mystical literature. Its absence from canonical texts contributed to its reputation as a forbidden work, accessible only to a select few initiates. The rediscovery of the Sword of Moses in the 19th century, particularly through manuscripts uncovered in European collections and the Cairo Geniza, provided scholars with invaluable insight into the intellectual and spiritual landscape of late antiquity. These fragments confirmed the text's antiquity and revealed a structured system of mystical practice rooted in sacred tradition. Yet, access to complete manuscripts remains limited, and the text's transmission history continues to elude definitive explanation. Today, the Sword of Moses is preserved within rare manuscript collections and academic institutions, studied as both a historical artifact and a testament to humanity's enduring quest to access the divine. Its incantations, preserved across centuries, evoke a worldview in which sacred knowledge was regarded as both a gift and a responsibility, powerful, transformative, and potentially dangerous in unworthy hands. If the manuscript were merely an expression of mystical devotion, its disappearance from religious canon might seem inevitable. Yet the secrecy surrounding its preservation suggests a deeper unease, an acknowledgement that the knowledge it contained was once believed capable of altering the natural and spiritual order. And if the sacred names inscribed within its pages were ever thought to wield genuine power, then the question remains: was the Sword of Moses forgotten because it was myth, or because it preserved truths too profound to remain in the open? Conclusion. Across centuries of secrecy, suppression, and rediscovery, the grimoires explored in this investigation reveal a consistent and unsettling pattern: knowledge once revered, later forbidden, and ultimately concealed. From the infernal hierarchies of the Ars Goetia to the celestial wisdom of the Arbatel, from the sacred invocations of the Liber Juratus Honorii to the talismanic power encoded within the Black Pullet, each manuscript reflects humanity's enduring desire to understand and perhaps command the unseen forces believed to govern existence. Though separated by geography, language, and belief systems, these texts share a common fate: restriction, censorship, and deliberate obscurity. The reasons for their suppression remain as ambiguous as their origins. Religious authorities denounce them as heretical. Scholars question their authenticity, and institutions confine them to restricted archives. Yet the persistence of these works, preserved in hidden libraries, private collections, and rediscovered fragments, suggests that they were never entirely forgotten. Instead, they endured in silence, passed through generations as relics of a worldview in which knowledge was inseparable from power. Whether interpreted as allegory, theology, or ritual practice, these grimoires occupy a liminal space between faith and forbidden inquiry. Today, historians and researchers approach these manuscripts with scholarly caution, recognizing them as invaluable records of intellectual and spiritual history. Their symbols, invocations, and cosmologies offer insight into cultures that sought to bridge the material and the divine, reflecting humanity's relentless pursuit of understanding beyond the boundaries of accepted doctrine. Yet the secrecy that continues to surround them invites a deeper question, one that transcends superstition and skepticism alike. If these books were merely relics of imagination, history would have preserved them openly. Instead, they were hidden, censored, and feared. Were they forbidden because they contain dangerous illusions, or because they preserve fragments of knowledge once believed too powerful for the world to possess?